on building the capacity to observe evil and act against it. Inspired by a conversation I had yesterday with a good friend, I wanted to think on this a little more and wrestle with it, because I think there's something in there for me, and maybe for you. When I think about wrestling against evil, I am wise enough now to know that it is not external, it is internal. That I am pulled towards degenerative and destructive behaviors constantly. As it says in the Word, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities. And the manifestation of these principalities, for me, results in behavior that breaks me down, or at least prevents me from building up. And so I say the word capacity sometimes, and sometimes I make it general and vague and not useful to myself and others. But sometimes, like now, it is something that is very real. To have capacity to observe and to act against evil are different levels of capability. And to not make it a circular argument, I want to have an example. Without revealing too much about the individuals in question. So I'm going to try to keep it to myself. The capacity to exert myself, to help a friend move or accomplish some physical task that they need help with. Maybe they could have managed on their own, but your assistance greatly contributed to their well-being and your relationship and that connection. Let's say helping a friend move places. And in that event, you talk about your lives, you connect, you talk about things that if you were unconditioned, if you were less trained, if you were emotionally numb, the conversation would be very short and unhelpful and not useful. And there wouldn't be much connection. But because you are healthy, you are trained, you are capable, you have the capacity for this relationship to develop more than that simple act of help or kindness. Ironically, a lot of these moving gigs have the pizza that is dripping with fat and oil and wheat that is not our highest choice. That European wheat is very different than our American wheat. But I digress. To have the capacity to observe and act against evil the evil in that instance was the evil of seeing your life fade away from you. The life in your days fade away from you. Something that chronic pain can do. But I think something more obvious that is evil is somewhat of an extreme in the acts of evil that we see every day that are not from evil people. The people themselves may not be evil, but the acts and the result of these acts are evil. Feeling some resistance to naming it, actually. It's kind of why I wanted to make this video, to find that. When we come up against these stories of people, maybe even our friends, who experience acts of violence or acts of assault, sexual assault or physical assault or verbal assault even, it can be easy to see a separation between you and that person. Like, oh, that's not a pleasant thing to hear, or no. Let me just say some words of comfort and move on, and not actually try to connect. And what connection here is, and what capacity here is to try to imagine yourself in that position, empathy, if you will, and to be in it with them, to have the capacity and know that you'll be all right, but also genuinely try to picture yourself in their situation. And this is a mental and emotional capacity, but the physical is not separated. And the evil was already done. But negligence is a facet of evil that falls under the cardinal sin of sloth, but just as well, it's one of those sneaky ones. Oftentimes it wears a hat called pride, and it does that by having this presentation like, what's the use? What's the use of being more capable in my mind and body? What's the use? I have too much going on already. I am dealing with a lot. You know, it's easy to assume that we'll rise to the occasion. That when a friend comes to us vulnerable and hurting, we'll be able to hear them. That we won't need to practice that capacity. That we won't need to take care of our minds and our bodies in a structured, progressive way. That the mind and body are separate. That there's no overlap, there's no connection between the two. When my friend is in trouble, I'll simply spontaneously become the person who has the capacity to sit and hear them, to listen to them, to see them, to hold them emotionally or physically. But that simply isn't true. And the more I believe that, the more my autistic awareness would create a conflict of identity. As Dostoevsky once said, the line between good and evil runs through the heart of every man and woman. He didn't say that last part, but I added it for clarification. And this is true. This is true. And sometimes good and evil is simply a choice to not let your eyes glaze over in a conversation or in a decision. That to choose something for your highest self may be abundantly obvious, yet your limiting beliefs and these destructive, evil habits may be holding you back from being good.